This is a delicious, juicy, and crispy pan-fried bao bun, a Shanghai local treat. This is a Sheng Jian Bao or pan-fried dumpling bao bun. Hi everyone, welcome back to Flavour Fridays. For this Sheng Jian Bao, I need to work on the dough first. I have 300 grams of plain flour here. I've got about half a teaspoon of instant yeast, just your normal yeast. I've got a pinch of sugar, maybe a teaspoon. I've got a teaspoon of salt as well. Salt and sugar balance each other out. It's not necessarily always for saltiness and always for sweetness. You need a little bit of both for that balance. Here I've got around 225 mils of just room temperature, slightly warm water. I've said this many times and I'll say it again. Depending on the brand of flour you're using or the humidity in your room, you might need to use more or less water. So I have this measured out, but I might not use it all. Often in Asian style doughs, we'll also add a little pinch of oil, and this just helps the dough stay really nice and soft. Into my bowl, I'm going to add the yeast, around 1 teaspoon of sugar, and around a teaspoon of salt. Remember, we need both to balance out the flavor. I'm gonna give this a quick mix, just with my fingertips. I'll add a little pinch of oil, maybe just around a teaspoon. And then I'm going to go in with my warm water. Now this is a slightly wetter dough. A wetter dough will give you much softer bao, pan-fried Sheng Jian Bao. Whenever you add more liquid to a dough, it's softer because more steam evaporates, and so it's a lot wetter. The less water you add into a dough, the firmer and the chewier it will be. That's the general rule. So slowly adding in the water, add most of it at a time, and then I'll give it a mix. Remember, this is a slightly wetter dough, and I'm just moving the bowl and my hands around and using my hand almost like a bear claw to mix everything together. A little bit more. I'm just going to mix it together until it becomes a slightly smoother ball of dough. I'm going to set it aside just for maybe 10 minutes, just so the flour can fully absorb that liquid, and then I'll work on kneading the dough. Right now, the flour has just been hit with all of that liquid. It's a bit wet, so it's just more difficult to knead. So just set this aside, just 10 minutes, wash your hands, and then we'll come back to the dough. Now that the dough has had a few minutes just to absorb a bit more of that water and relax, now I can start kneading and stretching the dough. So because this is a wetter dough, I'm going to refrain from really taking it out of the bowl and just kneading it because I know it'll just want to stick to the surface, and when it sticks to the surface, I'll want to add more flour, which ruins the point of having a wetter dough. So instead, I'm going to try and knead it and form it in the dough. We don't need to knead it too much because we want it to have a really soft texture. So all I'm going to do is kind of lift and stretch the dough, and then fold it over itself. Lift, and then fold over. Move the bowl at the same time. Lift, fold over. They do this often in bread baking with some sourdough breads because it's a very wet dough, and thus it's very difficult to knead the dough. So I'm just lifting up the side and folding it over itself, just several times until I get a nice smooth ball. So what you're looking for is kind of a smoother ball of dough, but it's still quite tacky to the touch. Once it's reached this point, which just takes several minutes, I'm going to pop it back into the bowl, seam side down. I'm going to wrap it in some plastic wrap and just let it sit in a shaded area of your room for about an hour until it slightly rises. You don't need it to completely double in size because this is slightly risen dough. You don't want it to completely rise into a kind of like a bao bun dough. So I'll just set this aside for about an hour. For the Sheng Jian Bao filling, it's a pretty classic dumpling filling. However, there are a few special ingredients. Now, I have some ginger, garlic, and spring onions, finely chopped like normal. I have the dumpling seasoning usuals like sesame oil, salt, sugar, white pepper, cornstarch. I've got some light soya sauce, and I also have a bit of Shaoxing wine. Shaoxing wine adds a depth of flavor to your pork mince or to any type of meat mince. And then I also have some chicken stock. This is our School of Wok master stock. What we do at the school is we cook a really big pot of stock and we simmer it down for maybe 1 or 2 days, and then we freeze them into ice cube trays. So we always have our homemade stock in the school. So I'm just going to add all of these ingredients into the pork filling. So once I've combined all of these ingredients together, you want your mixture to look a little bit wet because you just want it to be very, very juicy once it fully cooks into your Sheng Jian Bao. So now that this is all mixed together, I'm just going to set this aside and then continue waiting for that dough to rise. The dough has now risen partially. I don't need it to completely double in size or rise to the top. Remember, this is a partially risen dough. So basically, if your dough doesn't fully rise, it actually works well for this recipe. So my favorite part, I'm going to punch out all of the air and then I'm gonna shape my buns. Love that. The small things in life. This is exactly what I want my dough to look like. Now, this is a wet dough, so flour your hands and the work surface if you need to. I'm gonna roll this into a log and then divide it up into smaller dough balls. I'm just squeezing out all of the air pockets. You can use a knife or a handy bench scraper, and then I'm just going to break it up into smaller dough balls. Now that I have a dough ball, I'm just going to flatten it into a thin circle, and then I'm going to add quite a bit of filling into the middle. If your bao shaping skills aren't the best, it's okay. As long as you wrap them up into a nice tight ball, you flip them seam side down, it will be perfect. These street style Sheng Jian Bao is not about the perfect pleating, it's about the juiciness of the filling and the tenderness of the dough. So it's a very forgiving recipe. When I make my pleats, I use my right hand to create the pleats and lift up the dough. I use my left thumb to push down the filling. And this is because my right hand is my dominant hand. I just lift, and then I pinch, 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 pinch. Then you have a little bun, just like this. Now that I've shaped all of my Sheng Jian Bao, I'm just going to put them into a frying pan. You could use a cast iron like I am, or just a regular non-stick, lined with a little bit of oil, just vegetable oil in the bottom, and I'm just gonna put them seam side down in the oil. I want them to really be stacked and plumped up next to each other. Now I'm going to bring this onto the hob and start on a medium-low heat just to pan fry the bottom. Now that I have pan fried the bottom, it's not golden brown just yet, but it will continue to get a bit golden brown. I'm going to cover it with the lid and add a little bit of water into the frying pan. Now watch out because you are adding water into oil, so use the lid almost like a shield. Nothing happened. So you know your Sheng Jian Bao are done because the middle puffs up a bit and the bottom is beautiful and golden brown. You can serve it in the actual pot, you can serve it onto a plate. I've made a little dipping sauce. I'm going to sprinkle some toasted sesame seeds just to garnish. I am so excited to dig in. Pour in a little bit of sauce. This sauce is classic dipping sauce. It's just equal parts light soy sauce, vinegar, and some chili oil. Oh my goodness. Look at that. It's a little bit bready, but still super crispy. The dough, you can see, it looks like a cross between a dumpling dough and a bao dough, and that filling, because we added all the chicken stock, absorbed so much of the flavors. If you like this style of dish, you can check out my other dumpling videos. I make lots of different types of Asian street food. Leave a comment below also to recommend me any other dishes that you would like to see me make. We're always looking at your comments. And I'll see you next time on Flavour Fridays.